Over Thanksgiving break, I made this lino print wrapping paper, and I love how it turned out. And I had a lot of people ask if I would share my process. So I am not a lino cutting expert by any means. I'm still learning myself, but I thought I would share just my process and what I do. This is the lino block that I used. This is carved out of the Battleship Gray linoleum, and it's a pattern that's a little bit more complex if it's your first time carving. So I'm going to do a more simplified pattern of a dollar horse, and I'll make that pattern available to you. Since this pattern was a little bit more complicated, I drew it out on a piece of paper first, just to sort of solidify the design. I ended up carving a border, but then I cut it out. I didn't like the way it was printing. It was kind of making this pattern that was a little bit too square. So for this one, since it's simpler, I'm just gonna draw it right on the block. What I'm using is this Easy Carve linoleum block. It's kind of more rubber. It's not actually linoleum, but it's still used for making prints and stamps and things. And it was what I first used, and I found it's just a little easier to carve than the linoleum. You just have to try different things and see what you like. So I have this little hand-carved dollar ornament, and I like the shape of it. So this is what I'm going to use just to draw out the shape. Okay, so we have the basic outline here. And then I printed up just some traditional dollar horse designs. So I could pick something that would be fairly simple to carve. And you can really take it as simple or as complex as you want. I kind of like this one, I think, because the lines are really simple, and I might just make a few little tweaks. So I'll start with sort of this saddle portion here. Okay, there we go. The nice thing about drawing right on here is if you do something you don't like, as I did, you can just draw over it because we're going to be carving it out. The drawing is not a part of the finished product at all. So what you need to decide at this point is what is going to be printed with color and what is going to be relief. And so the space around the horse is definitely going to be relief. And we have kind of a lot of material, so I'm going to cut some of it out just with a pair of scissors. So what I'm going to do is have the body of the horse be what is printed, and then all of this detail will be what is carved, as well as what is around here will all be in relief. So that means it's recessed so that when I use this as a stamp, the only raised areas are going to be the main body of the dollar horse. For cutting, I'm using, so this is a set by Speedball. It's inexpensive. It's a great place to start. It comes with different blades, and it comes with all the blades that you'll need to get started. I found this mechanism that holds in the blade to be a little fiddly at times, so I did end up buying some different ones. But these are actually little vintage lino cutter holders. And so I'm using these blades that came with this set just in these old holders. So I'm using the number 1 and number 5. So if you're just starting out, just go ahead and get the Speedball set. It's a good place to start. And then you can get nicer tools if you realize, hey, I really love this. I'm gonna do more of it. So when lino cutting, and this is the biggest comment I heard from people who have done it before, like in school or something, is the temptation is to hold the block like this and cut like this. But then what happens is if this slips, it's gonna go into your hand. So you wanna try to always keep your hands behind the blade as much as possible. And I'm just gonna start with the number 5, which is the larger of the two, and just cut out the surrounding material. And I'm just using channels to do that. The pattern that is around the object doesn't matter as long as it's recessed enough so that it doesn't print. The nice thing though is I think that the lino cutting, it just looks beautiful when you have these little hand carved details. And the blades will curve around a corner like this. Now, one tip when you're cutting along a straight line like this, you don't want to cut towards the line and make this a rough edge. So we're going to carve along the line to make a nice, straight, continuous edge. Just make it look a lot neater. Okay, so we have the space around the horse cut out, and I'm going to switch to the number 1 blade, which will give me some more detail for these smaller parts, and I'm going to cut out within the pencil lines. As I said earlier, it definitely helps if you plan out your design ahead of time, and I would not recommend doing words or numbers because everything is going to be printed in the reverse. So unless you're really good at writing backwards, I wouldn't suggest that to start. So we're gonna carve in the same manner that we did the exterior, like around the horse. We're just gonna cut with a bit more precision. I'm doing a few passes just to make sure I get these little channels deep enough so they show up. Sometimes these really fine lines don't show up very well if you don't get them deep enough. Okay, so I've got some solid colored wrapping paper. I ordered some blue and green off of Amazon. This is supposed to be matte, but it definitely has kind of a sheen to it. You can use both sides. The opposite side is a bit more matte, but then it's kind of this minty green. So we're gonna go with the darker green side. What's nice though is this comes with a ton of paper. Because it's too hard to work with in the full sheet, I just cut off a piece that's gonna be a good average size piece for wrapping paper. Just for like maybe a couple of small to medium-sized presents or one big one. And then the other supplies I have is, and I've got a glass palette. You can use, now I just happen to have one of these. You can use like a paper plate, that would be fine. I've got, the ink I'm using is Caligo Safe Wash Relief Inks. And this is an oil-based ink, but it's washable with soap and water. So it's easy to wash off of the stamp. The downside to this is it is oil-based. It takes a while to dry. So you have to sort of plan this project in advance if you're using this kind of ink, because it takes about, I'd say 5 to 7 days for it to dry. And that could be kind of impractical to have wrapping paper like hanging all over your house. It's like, I'll just go buy some. So another option though, you can use acrylic paints. That'll dry much faster. But I used that and I just found I didn't get as crisp of a design. So I'm going to go ahead and use printing ink for this. But if you need to, go ahead and use some acrylic. That would be fine. Okay, so I've put a little bit on here and then I'm going to roll this. This is a brayer. And if you don't have one of these, the first time I did lino cutting, I just used a brush and that'll be just fine. You can kind of brush it on. Especially if you're using acrylics, a brush is gonna work fine. But what you wanna do is get a very, very thin coat of paint on the roller. It's not like painting a room. You don't want this huge glob of paint. First of all, it'll take forever to dry. It'll be messy. You just don't want to do that. So I'm going to move this. And of course, I already have it on my hands and then I'm getting it on the paper. And I'm using just a couple of things on my desk to weigh down the paper. Okay, and then I'm putting a paper towel along the edge where I'm going to start so that I can let the pattern hang over the edge. So I'm going to just set, let's see. I'm gonna set this down. I know you can't see it. I'll lift this over here for right now. Set it down on a clean spot and roll the ink on. Now, this is a little bit more challenging because we've got white ink and a white block. So just keep that in mind. They do come in like blue and pink and different colors. And then we're gonna go ahead and start this first one like right here. And then you can either just push it down really good, like do something like put a book down and put weight on it, or you can use a little roller. These are called brayers. And they're not very expensive, but you don't need to buy a tool like this unless you're gonna be doing a lot of this. And there we go. We've got our first little dollar horse. So we'll just put some more on. And if you want to get like really fancy with this, you can definitely, let's see, maybe we'll stagger them. You can definitely like measure it out and mark where you want them all to go. This is just, I just don't think you need to do that for this. This is just a fun little project. Doesn't need to be precise. So for the design, I'm just eyeballing this. I'm not worrying about it too much. So obviously we can't make a dollar horse that's turned the other way, but we can make one upside down if we want to, which maybe, I don't know, maybe I'll go ahead and do that. So there we go. There's kind of a idea of the finished paper. And obviously the pattern can be whatever you want it to be. You can do all sorts of things with it. You could just, if you want to stamp a present with just one, you can. If you want to do a staggered pattern, you can. I've kind of ended up doing like stripes here, and that's fine. And then you can always add some hand painted detail if you want to. I was thinking this would look really pretty with just some gold paint added, like maybe just to one of the doll horses that's right on top. So of course you can wash this with soap and water. I just use a scrub brush and wash it. But a nice thing to do before you do that is to just clean your block with baby wipes. And you can clean your palette or whatever surface you use and the roller. So there you go. We printed our own wrapping paper out of just this little block, and then we can use this for all sorts of projects, which is the fun thing about cutting these blocks, is then you can use them again and again.